I'm going to make this yukata and show you how it's done really quickly. You can sew along with me and make a yukata just like this. The sewing pattern is linked in the description below. Grab that, come along and let's make this beautiful yukata. But before I start, I need to get into that yukata and show you what this fabric is all about. This is a rayon fabric. It is non-stretch, but it does move just a little bit. I think there's a little bit of spandex or something in it as well. To be honest, the place I got it doesn't really tell you too much about their fabrics, but then isn't that half the fun? It's gonna make a beautiful yukata. It is 150 centimeters or 60 inches wide, and I bought 3.5 meters, which is about 3.7 yards. It's just over 3.5 yards. And it's gonna make a yukata, plus it will make a sash from the self fabric. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut off the first 50 centimeters, about 19.5 or 20 inches. That will be set aside to make the sash. I've taken off the part that's going to be the sash. Now it is time. I'm going to cut my fabric in half in between the selvage and selvage, and then half again to get 4 equal quarters running the length of the fabric. And I have 4 strips that look just like this. I'm going to take one of them and cut that in half again lengthways. So the narrow strips will make up the collars and the front overlaps. The wide strips will make up the body and the sleeves. I'm going to make a men's yukata, so the sleeves are going to be about this length. These sleeves hang 50 centimeters or 20 inches from the wrist, which means they go 40 inches or a whole meter all the way around. Around about that. That's good for a men's yukata. So what I need is 2 1-meter strips out of this. This is 3 meters, and then I'll just have some leftover fabric. The front overlaps literally overlap at the front, and they turn the garment into a double-breasted garment. So it sits sort of here. This is the front body piece. It comes over and just covers a bit there. The front overlaps are cut 5 centimeters or 2 inches shorter than the shoulder to hem measurement. I know on this that my garment is going to be 150 centimeters from shoulder to hem, which is 60 inches long. I'm going to cut these to 55 inches long or 145 centimeters, but there's an even better way to do it. This is 3 meters long, and I need to get 2 times 145 centimeters, which is 290 centimeters or 110 inches. What I'm going to do is take the whole strip, take 10 centimeters off the top, and then cut the rest of it in half, rather than measuring 145 centimeters twice. I know this is 3 meters. I know if I take 10 centimeters off it and then cut it in half, I'll have 2 strips that are 145 centimeters exactly. From the last narrow strip, I'm going to cut 2 collars. The collar comes in 2 parts. One is half the length of the other exactly, so it's really easy to cut. First is the tomo area. That is, starts here, goes around the neck and comes to here. It's the collar's friend, and it protects the collar from getting soiled and worn, because this is the highest used area of the entire kimono. What happens is, if this does get soiled or worn, it's taken off, and then the collar's taken off, and you put it underneath the collar and then put the collar back on. So it's sort of a spare tire for the collar. You get a lot more use out of the kimono that way. So the first one is 90 centimeters, which is 35.5 inches. And the second one is exactly double that, 180 centimeters, like 6 feet. But all I'm going to do is cut the 90 centimeters or 35.5 inches, and then use that to find the full collar. Because also by marking that, I'm going to be marking the center point, which is something you really need for your collar. So you're already doing some marking as well while you're in there. It's a really efficient way to cut the fabric. So there we have it. The 2 parts of the collar, the 2 front overlaps, 2 sleeves and 2 body pieces. Let's get sewing. Making the sash, cut that first bit that we took off in half. Bring 2 ends together where the selvages are. And then from the top corner, sew the short side, and then all the way down the long side. Leave a gap in the middle and start again about 10 centimeters or 4 inches, so we can turn the sash out, and then we come back and close that once it's all turned and pressed. Once you've done your sash, we start with the center back seam. In this case, I'm finishing my seams with a French seam. It's not as daunting as it first sounds. You just do wrong sides together, then right sides together. So you're still passing over it twice. So I sew from the hem up to the center back neck. And I'm doing exactly the same thing with the front overlaps. From the hem up to the neck with a French seam. Nice and easy. Now you can do this with the front overlaps before or after they've been attached. I've done them after, probably a bit naughty, but it still works. What you want to do is double turn the front edge. Once they've been attached, obviously the front edge is very apparent. It's the raw edge that's going to be the front of the garment. What we're doing is just double turning that to close what will be the center front opening of the garment. We attach the tomo eri to the eri, so the collar's friend to the collar. We turn over the ends of the over collar or the tomo eri and then sew it on, still right sides together, but from the inside, so you get this sort of loop effect. And that way, when we put it onto the collar, you have a lovely little overlap where you've sewn it on, but no great big seam. I've just pinned the first pass of the collar. So the first way you go over the collar. I like to do the right side of the garment first, then I do a ditch stitch underneath that and sew from the outside through to the second layer and catch that. Sometimes the easiest way is to sew on one side and then hand sew the other side so you don't get crooked seams coming through on the other side, especially if you've got contrast cloth and thread and things like that. It's actually far easier and quicker to hand sew the second pass, especially of the collar. But this is quite easy as well. If you're good at ditch stitching, it's just a very long collar. So what I always do is I start at the center back and I work down one side, then I come back and I work down the other side. So you're only ever doing 90 centimeters or about 35 inches at a time. It's much better to do it that way. So if you are unpicking, you're only unpicking a little bit rather than the whole thing. Also, if you start at one end and sew all the way along to the other, chances are the whole thing will gradually creep across, and at the other end you're going to have it a bit skew and uneven. This is the hardest part of the garment. You're sewing on a curve, you've got a lot of layers, and then you're ditch stitching through layers. So this is the hardest part. It takes as long to attach the collar as it does to make the entire garment. If you're taking a long time doing this, that is fine. Everyone takes a long time doing this. People who make kimono for a living find this difficult. It is difficult, but it can be done. And you can do it. You just need to pin a lot, you need to prepare a lot, and you need to be ready. Your collar should be well pressed, so when you bring the second layer across, it sits where it should sit. You should have a peak. Everything should be well prepared before you go. The easiest way to make mistakes is to not prepare and just get stuff and throw it under the machine. That's how you make all your mistakes. You get prepared, you read your pattern, you read it again, you pin again, you put more pins than you think you should. There should be loads of pins around here. It should look like some kind of 1980s safety pin garment. It should look something Cher would have worn. And then you're ready to put it under the machine. And as you do that, you do it slowly. You do it slowly for a few reasons. One is you want to make sure that you're not getting any tucks as you pass under. So along here, you're coming around a curve. You're sewing from over here and you can't see what's on this side. So we're coming around, I go really slowly around this curve that I've turned out and clipped into. And as I get to these bits, I'm constantly stopping the machine and I'm pulling the collar back and making sure that everything on this side is lying flat. Using all my fingers as I'm sewing as well to feel what's going on. And we're just slowly putting it through the machine. At the same time, you're also being extremely gentle because none of this is on the straight of grain. It is along here, and this helps. I often use the selvage for one side of the collar because that's a great stabilization for the fabric. But the kimono, the actual body of the kimono itself, is all on the off grain. So not bias, it's the off grain, but it still acts like the bias and really does stretch. If I grab this and get it on the bias, can you see that? This is what it will do if you start pulling at it as it goes through the machine and trying to coerce this collar onto it and make it push. You need to be nice and easy with it, and you need to let the fabric go through the machine with the feed dogs by itself. Otherwise you will stretch out, especially this big diagonal coming down to the front opening. You'll stretch that out and then you'll have a sort of bowed and rippled collar, or cowled it's called. Cowl, like a cowl neck. So it's sitting off grey. So there's lots to do with this. I've done 2 videos just on this method. So just on putting your collar onto your kimono. They're in the description below. You can go and have a look at them. They're all over my YouTube channel, and it helps you through it stage by stage with close-ups and everything like that. It's a big process. Once you're done with this though, you've got all straight seams and it just goes up like that. So this is the hard part, and then we move on. And it looks fantastic when you do it right. So take your time, get it right, and it will be absolutely beautiful. This part again is covered in the full tutorial that's on my YouTube channel about putting on your collar. But what I'm doing here is I'm pressing the excess fabric into the collar. So you fold it in a very certain way, this sort of origami way, and having that press in your collar at the halfway point, that peak, really helps you find how to lay this fabric down. And if you do it nicely, it looks absolutely beautiful. They're like sails going up underneath your collar. So we just fold it so gently like that, and then we press it down to get these lovely triangular folds in the excess fabric from the front overlaps, or the akumi, and the body. And then that gets enveloped in the actual collar and bulks out the collar. So it's doing 2 things. It is padding your collar. It means your collar will sit nicely on you as well and give you that sort of heft, that heavy feeling that sort of holds the whole garment down onto your body. It's really nice. And this is what we use the excess fabric for from cutting. You can put this into that very top part at the center back neck, which doesn't have any of these folds, and if you need to add some extra, you can use that in the back, or something stronger as well. But this is what we're doing with that part, and it's covered in full detail with close-ups and everything, and I use a real transparent fabric in the video to show how to do this, because it's very complicated when you first do it. Once you get used to it, it's actually quite cool, and it makes some great patterns in there as well. So this is what we're doing before we come back with the second pass in the ditch stitch, and we close the whole collar. Your collar is done and looking fantastic. Now we're into the fast part. This is where it really starts to come together. So I've got my sleeves, I line them up. One with the folds at the top of the sleeve and the top of the shoulder. That is why they're so important and why they're there. We line them up, and then we line it up with the marks that we've made along the body. Now I'm doing French seams, so this might look a bit odd because I'm putting wrong sides together. If you're doing it any other way, you're obviously doing right sides together, but my first pass will be wrong sides. So I'm going to line that all up, get it into place, and then whiz down here from mark to mark, and that is the sleeve attached. Your sleeves are on. All the pattern pieces are now part of the garment. The whole piece has come together. What we have to do now is close the sleeves, close the side seams, and do the hems, and you're done. It's all straight sewing from now on. I've closed the sleeves, and they look like this. Can you see they're just a square bag down the bottom? So You finish this in however way you're finishing it, whether you're turning the edges, you're French seaming, or you're serging or overlocking, depending on what you call it as well. And I'm making a masculine garment. So I'm making a garment for a man. I'm making a garment for me in the masculine style. I don't always make them that way. Often I make them with far longer sleeves because I like the way they feel. They look really cool. And so I finish it in the feminine way, which is by adding a miyatsuguchi. So I'll show you that in a second, but first I'll show you what I'm doing for the masculine style of a yukata. Here is the sleeve. You'll notice that the sleeve bag, the edge of the sleeve bag that is closest to the body is closed. So it's often either there's no part that hangs down like that, or it's completely closed off like it is here. Whereas a feminine garment, this part of the sleeve would be open, and so would part of the side seam. So that's the difference between men's and women's garments. Literally, that's kind of the only big difference between the two of them. And it also deals with the side seam. So because of this, I've just gone around. I've got the cuff here, which I've just turned back, and that looks lovely. And I'm going to press that now. And then I press in the katayama, and again. But that's what I've done. That's how you finish a sleeve in the masculine style. So a men's yukata, a men's kimono, this is how they're done. And then I'm going to do the side seam next, and I've pinned it already, just because it's cumbersome to do it right on screen, sort of up here in front of the camera. So I've pinned the side seam already, and you'll see here, there's about a little bit over 1 centimeter, which is ½ an inch from the actual top of the seam where it meets the sleeve. This is so there isn't a whole lot of bulk at this seam junction, and the bottom of the sleeve bag can fall like that. So you're closing the sleeve all the way up, but you are still leaving a little bit of a gap just to let everything that's coming into that seam junction, we can just ease some of that bulk and let it hang nice and easily down from the side seam. Otherwise you get a bulk and a clump, and then you get pulling sort of up into here, and you can see that there's something is under stress under your arm. Just by wearing the garment, it pulls at the neck and it pulls at the underarm. Had I wanted to finish this in the feminine style, I have a gown that's finished in that way here. So you see, it's a far longer sleeve. Women's sleeves are longer. Long sleeves on kimono are made for women's kimonos. And as women age, their sleeves get shorter to the point where they're at the same length as a men's sleeve, but they still have a miyatsuguchi, because the point of this, which is the miyatsuguchi. So there's the sleeve, here is the side seam, and the side seam actually terminates about 10 centimeters, sometimes 4 inches, sometimes 3 inches from where it meets, where it would meet the bottom of the sleeve there. And this is called miyatsuguchi, so you can get into the garment and arrange the garment when you're dressing in it, because you dress differently if you're wearing a feminine garment. So because of that as well, you leave the edge of the sleeve open that's on the side seam. So you can see there's the sleeve bag, this red bit, that's all open. I haven't closed that. You close the bottom, and then the side is kept open. The rest of the sleeve is finished the same. You close the bottom and you close up until the cuff there. But that's the difference. And now, because of this, you have to plan ahead a bit with a women's garment. Because of the miyatsuguchi, the seam needs to be finished before you seam. So you can't serge this after you've sewn the side seam. You have to serge this side seam now, and you have to do the same with the sleeve. And then you press the sleeve seam allowance open when you press it, so like that. And then you also press the side seam allowance open, and that's all because of the miyatsuguchi and having to deal with the fact that what your seam is doing is coming up, then it's opening, but then it's closing again with the sleeve, but in 2 different sides. So it forks, and then it sort of forks down twice. It's quite complicated. So you need to have open seams, as in like this. They need to be finished on either side and they're pressed open like that in order to navigate that seam junction. So because I'm doing a men's garment, everything about men's garments is simpler. The seams, the sleeves, everything, the way they dress. That's just how it is, to be honest, in history as well as in Japanese clothing. So it's easier to do it this way. I'm going to sew the side seams. So the side seams over here, they've all been done and they're pressed back. They've got a little bit of a lip on the actual pressing of the seam. That's just, it's a Japanese thing that they do. They just sort of press the seams back. I wonder if I can, yeah. They press the seams back just a little bit over the stitching. So they get this little lip, and it's a couple of millimeters, 1 to 2 millimeters, so less than a quarter of an inch. It is this tiny little thing. And what they do is they do that so the seams sort of float. They sit up a bit and they just float. It makes the whole thing look fantastic. So if you're doing this, give that a shot. What I'm doing now is lifting the hem. I've done one pass with the iron, lifting it up by 1 centimeter, so half an inch. And I'm going to lift it by another, I think 3 centimeters, maybe 4 centimeters, depending on how I feel. I make this garment with the same measurements each time, and I usually just sort of see how high I want to lift the hem, because every garment is a bit different and every textile is a bit different, and every time you buy it you get a slightly different length. Everyone will know this. You go into the store and you get a couple of centimeters here or there. So I'm just going to lift the hem to make it a lovely length. So here it is, all finished. I've put the sash around as well and it looks incredible. Let me lift up the sleeve so you can see. This is a fantastic garment. Look at those geometric lines, and I love the asymmetry of it. I made sure that when I was cutting it, I didn't match everything and make it symmetrical. I wanted it to be a bit off, so you can see this side has a lot more white, and then over this side we have all the black lines are congregating. It looks fantastic. I put the sash on, there you go. So that looks fantastic as well. And that is how it's all put together. It looks amazing. I didn't make this for the mannequin though. I did make it for myself. So I'm going to put it on and then we'll have a look at it a bit more up close. Look at that. That is fantastic. Oh, it's comfortable as well. So there it is. Look at that. Doesn't that look fantastic? These geometric stripes are brilliant, and they sort of wind around, and oh, look at that at the back. They get really complicated on one side, and then on here, look at the big triangles coming up. That is really cool. So that is how you make a yukata. I've made it in the masculine style, so you can see I haven't got Miyatsuguchi. This is for a man, and it's got the shorter sleeves because of that as well. But it's fantastic. Oh, I really like that. I'm seeing this for the first time, so that's why I'm getting so excited as I have a look at it. Go and get the sewing pattern and you can make your own version of this. The pattern is in the description below. There's a men's yukata, there's the kimono pattern that will make this, but also has instructions on how to make this in the feminine style with the longer sleeves and Miyatsuguchi, so you can tie it with all the bits and pieces that you need to if you're dressing in the feminine style. This is fantastic. Oh, it's so cool and comfortable as well, and feels amazing. It's brilliant. I hope you enjoyed watching that. I hope you make a kimono or a yukata yourself. Grab the patterns, they're down in the description. Come along and sew with me. I'm Kimono Alex. This is House of Kimono. Follow me for everything about kimono.